Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Okay, David, you're Elton John. And Sarah, you're Kiki D.
Just don't make us sing.
No.
Is that your go-to karaoke when the office party lights up? No?
Hey, I don't go near karaoke machines.
All right. From McQuarrieHunterLLP, we have David Halkett, partner, and Sarah Morse, associate. In the family law department, there's one of you missing.
Yes. Leah Donaldson is the third member of our crew, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And we've had her in as well many times, so it's good to have you here. We're talking about child custody and when, what ages children go to which parent. Is there an age where the child can decide for themselves?
Yeah, well, they don't really decide for themselves, but we have to hear their voice. When the child starts, under our family law, when they're 8, we can start listening to what they have to say, so we can get views of the child report. When they're 8, it's less weights given to it because they're younger. By the time the child becomes 13 or 14, usually the court will abide by what the child wants. Although the court will never say that it's the child's choice, they just take their
opinion into consideration. Exactly,
because as the court always has the overriding view and role to make sure the children are safe and protected.
Well, because I'm just really using you as the setup for my joke that I like to use. Now, you've heard it before, but it's for people who are listening for the first time. Sarah, you've heard this joke?
I'm sure I have.
The judge brings the child into chambers and says, "Johnny, who do you want to live with? You want to live with your mother?" "No, my mother beats me." "Do you want to live with your father?" "No, my father beats me." "Well, who do you want to live with?" "The Canucks, because they can't beat anybody."
I've heard that one, yeah.
It used to be the Leafs until the Leafs season this year. So,
yeah.
All right. So with children, you have them moving from parent to parent maybe as they age.
Yep.
And then eventually they can decide to stay with one parent at a certain, especially when they're 18, right?
Yeah, although often our courts tend to, if you're 12, 13, 14 and you made a decision, the courts usually will not interfere because there's a greater concern the child will just run away if they're forced to do the other. And no one really wants to throw a child into the back of a police vehicle, so to speak, to take him or her to a visit.
Now, how do you deal with one parent spoiling the child for favor versus the other? Like you might have one that's the disciplinarian and then the other one that takes them and buys them anything they want. I mean, do you ever have situations where you go in front of a judge and say, this is what's happening?
The unfortunate part is there really isn't a lot you can do about it. It's the whole Disneyland parent syndrome where one parent maybe, does have more income accessible to them and is able to, spoil that child more. And it comes up a lot in terms of discipline and sort of the Disneyland parenting.
Or the parenting styles. One lets them stay out all night long and the other one says you got to be home at 10:30.
Yeah.
And we can try and address that when we are negotiating in terms of coming up with schedules for bedtime. And I've had to do that on files where we've literally set out what the child's nap routine is, bedtime. And there's social science research saying that you should try and mirror each other's homes if you can. I mean, the same stuffed animal or having a picture of the other parent and anything that can make that a more comfortable environment for the child. But trying to enforce that.
I was going to say, you can tell that Sarah's child's only 6, and we're talking about enforcing bedtimes. But it's a difficult one because often when the child gets older, the judges know there's probably a reason that the child is moving from one parent to the other. It comes up in a lot of them where they say, well, of course, they have like Xbox and PS4 at that house, and I don't let them play it till all hours and such like that. Judges know there's probably a reason you're moving. But as long as the reason isn't because you've been poisoned by one parent or for a totally invalid reason, they will pay attention to it. But it is tough because there's usually one parent that's going to have more money.
But isn't that supposed to equalize with child payments and spousal support? You would think?
Well, to some extent, child support is payable, but it's never necessarily going to equalize everything.
Okay, so when you have a custody agreement with the children, how is child support determined?
I can let Sarah take care of that one because she's the child support guru in her office.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's legislated, so it's literally just...
And is it meant to equalize the homes? Or is it just, we just touched on that?
Well, we could get into a long discussion about that. David and I were talking about that earlier about how it's based on gross income. And that's the way it is right now. The child support guidelines set out what amount is payable based on the payor's gross income. So it's fairly easy to determine, and the only way that changes is if a child is with the other parent, the payor parent, more than 40% of the time. And then you can do what's called a set-off between the difference in the incomes. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. You pay what you pay based on your income.
It doesn't equalize. So say, for example, you had a situation where...
give us some numbers, like how it would work.
So say, for example, you earn $40,000 a year and you have 3 children. Your spouse may not, may earn $10,000, $11,000 a year, whatever he or she does. Assuming there's no spousal support for the moment, if you're paying about $800, maybe $850 a month in child maintenance, that's never going to equalize the two incomes. You're going to go down to like 30 because it's after-tax dollars.
So you're not trying to make your ex whole. You're just trying to make the children's life better.
Exactly. Right. So that they're not supposed to have a substantially different standard of living in the
between
two
the
homes.
Houses.
So is there any way to enforce that the money goes to the child and not goes to the ex's vacation once a year?
No, and we hear that all the time. I have to keep buying them new clothes because
the clothes don't come back.
I'm paying child's maintenance, but it's not going right to the children. And the easiest explanation of that, it all goes into one pot. How the recipient uses the money is basically up to him or her. Maintenance is to provide a roof on the person's head, clothes, food, etc. You don't have to say that, well, there's $500 here, so I have to buy $500 worth of pants or shirts. It all goes into the pot. One could also argue that taking some of the money from child maintenance and having a holiday out of it is actually good for the children too. They're getting away. Mm-hmm. What you also, though, can tell the payor is you have no obligation then to buy them jeans or Air Jordans or whatever because you're paying maintenance. That's supposed to be bought by the recipient.
So when you consult a client, you say to them, well, you shouldn't be paying for extra.
I just say you don't have to. If you do, that's up to you.
Right.
If you want to go out and buy your 12 or 13-year-old True Religion jeans that the mom won't buy, that's on you. No one has to if you're paying maintenance.
Okay, so what happens when you have an agreement? Does a judge? What happens? Like you might have a conversation in your office where you come to an agreement about what's going to happen. Is there a rubber stamp process? Is it filed somewhere? Is there a record? How does it work? It is. And again, it depends on what process you go through, whether you've had to go to chambers or go to trial and get a court order, or whether you've done an out-of-court parenting agreement, which we do sometimes, a mediated agreement, or whether you have a separation agreement. So any of those can be enforceable as if it were a court order. You can just file it in the registry, whether it's provincial court or Supreme Court. And again, as we referred to before with respect to family maintenance, any of those can be used to file with family maintenance to enforce maintenance. And how often do you recommend your clients revisit that child support arrangement? It should be included. Yeah, you're supposed to review it on a yearly basis based on the child support guidelines because your income, you're supposed to pay it on your T4, exactly. Your whatever your 150. The one thing to remember as well is if your income went up and you didn't revisit it, you could be hit with retroactive claims and have to pay for the years that you pay the difference for what you should have paid. Okay, I've got a question for you. Say you own a plumbing company, okay, and you run everything through your business. Yep. You've got a car, a pickup truck that you drive, and you've got an office, and you've got employees, and you don't take a lot of income out, but you run a lot of expenses through your business. So you're paying child support based on your income, but your T4, whatever you pay yourself from your plumbing company, is less. Yeah. And you're running a lot of your expenses through your business. Well, the recipient, if they're not happy with the amount they're receiving, can simply bring an application to, in effect, impute income to the payor and says, look, you claim that you're making $25,000, but your car payments are $700 a month.
if you're running the car payments through the company and you're using it for personal use, that can be added back in. If you're paying wages, say, to a non-arm's length person, so your new spouse, new girlfriend, or that may be added back in, especially if they're not doing the work
So they
in the
make
business.
an employee of the business to...
Exactly.
Yeah, I see.
So there's a lot of things you can do to get to the actual income.
And what about cash, people who deal a lot of cash? Like, I always use the tradesperson. Hey, you want to come? Need some drywall done. You want to come and drywall my basement? I'll pay you cash.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you... I'm sure there are exes who know a lot about how they run their business that could make that uncomfortable for them, right?
That's a tough one because you can look at bank statements, but not everyone runs all their cash through the bank.
No.
You can do a net worth kind of assessment and say, look, there's no way with claiming 25 grand you were affording to spend 2 weeks in Hawaii.
And there's cases on that lifestyle.
Yeah.
There are a series of lifestyle cases where you can look at the potential payor's lifestyle and impute income. And I did that for years with the contract that I worked on, which the majority of the payors were taxi drivers, mechanics, tattoo artists, things of that nature, where if you looked at what Stats Canada said for that particular line of work, was 30,000, 35,000, where in fact we knew this individual was making 100,000 or 150,000. So that's part of our job, is to try and figure out how to impute income, looking at lifestyle or what the recipient knows about the 10 years they were together, that everything was paid in cash, that they had a lavish lifestyle. And so it's I quite enjoy doing the imputing income cases, because it's, you get to do a little bit of forensic work.
There's also a difference between someone who's getting their cash legally, and
that's where it gets slippery.
Yeah,
Right?
one could argue that if you're getting cash and to avoid tax, it's illegal anyway. But leaving that aside, if it's real illegal, what we consider legal,
like a drug dealer, or something
exactly,
like that,
someone like that, they don't pay any tax because they don't report any income. But often, spouse knows so much about it that they're willing to ensure it doesn't go to court and get out. So often deals are reached that way.
Well, you see a lot of interesting stuff.
We do, for sure.
All right. When we come back, we're going to find out about, are you allowed to relocate and move if you have an agreement with children in a divorce situation? Next on The Law Show on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.